Why would John Bolton, the man who has wanted to bomb Iran for 30 years, suddenly sound the alarm about the president who finally did it? Politico's headline read, "John Bolton sounds the alarm on Trump's Iran gamble." And here's what Bolton told News Nation.
We can't get a completely straight answer from the president what his objective is. He says, with one set of remarks, it's regime change. And that, by the way, is my preferred objective. I'm entirely in favor of it. But then says in other remarks that this could be over with in a couple days. If this turns into a one and done operation, 2, 3, 4 days of strikes, and then President Trump says, okay, opposition, over to you, there's not going to be regime change.
Bolton's complaint was echoed across the British press and the foreign policy establishment. It's that the president is not on board with their policy of regime change. Chatham House, the intellectual arm of the British Foreign Office, chimed in, saying, "You don't do regime change from the air. No strategy, can't be done from the air." That was the expert consensus over the weekend. Then on Sunday, President Trump sat down with The Atlantic and said this about the Iranians. "They want to talk, and I've agreed to talk, so I will be talking to them. They should have done it sooner. They waited too long." Iran's new leadership called Washington, not London, and Trump answered. Now, the left is denouncing the strike. The neocons are worried Trump won't manage it correctly, and everyone is arguing about whether it will succeed, all assuming the same thing about what success means. What none of them understand is that the president's policy is a rejection of more than 100 years of geopolitics, what's known as the Great Game. And key operatives of that Great Game, like former Prince Andrew, are now on the chopping block, and that is not a coincidence. I'm Susan Kokinda, and I've been tracking how British geopolitics has subverted American foreign policy for over a century. That is, until now. So if you want to follow this fight, please hit the like, subscribe, and share buttons so we can stay in touch and expand our reach. Today, I'm going to show you 3 things that are actually one. First, why the president's strategy is leaving the neocons and the British on the sideline. Second, how the Iran strike has cracked the special relationship wide open and in public. And third, how the men who personally ran the inside of the special relationship are now under arrest. The end of geopolitics is the thread running through all of this. So let's be precise about what Bolton actually said. The Politico reporter asked Bolton, "Do you think the president and his team have fully considered all the consequences?" And Bolton said, "It would be different from his normal behavior, to say the least, because he doesn't particularly think strategically. He can swing wildly on a given issue in the course of the day, and he's obviously swung all the way from where he was in the first term to regime change, and he could swing back." But Bolton's fear isn't that Trump acted. His fear is that Trump might not finish the job on Bolton's terms. Because what he means by strategic thinking is committing the U.S. to a fully managed regime change architecture. Transition teams, Western-approved successor networks, in other words, replace one controlled regime with another. And Trump is not using that playbook. Now, here's Ann Applebaum, who's got one of the most severe cases of TDS, writing in The Atlantic on the same weekend. Trump has no plan for the Iranian people. Now, apparently, Ann didn't read what her own publication was about to print, because the man she said had no plan had already agreed to talk to Tehran. So one of the flagship journals of the foreign policy establishment ran both pieces in the same weekend. That tells you everything about the state of expert opinion right now. Then along came Bronwyn Maddox, the director of Chatham House. "You don't do regime change from the air." Chatham House has enthusiastically justified every regime change, from Libya, Syria, Iraq to Ukraine, never once worrying about whether it could be done from the air. Their concern isn't that regime change will fail. Their concern is that it's being done without them, without their opposition networks and their transition governments. Bolton, Applebaum, Chatham House, they're all standing outside the room, and they can't even find the door. The old players are gone. The Bolton regime change architecture doesn't apply to a leadership that wasn't part of the old game. Iran's new leadership is calling Washington because Washington is the only party that actually changed anything. The British have played the great game in the shadows for over 100 years. Now it's in the open, and it's being stymied. So if you want to understand how this is unfolding, subscribe to Promethean Action's free newsletter. The link is below. Now let's talk about what the Iran strike did to the so-called special relationship, because this is where over 100 years of British manipulation of American policy is shattering right out in the open. When the strikes began on Saturday, Britain's position was extraordinary. The UK was informed Friday afternoon. Not included. Starmer refused to let the US use the British bases in Diego Garcia or in Britain itself. Britain refused not because it developed a conscience about international law. It refused because it's no longer running the table. And the British press admitted that it is the end of the game for the special relationship, with a headline that read, "Starmer faces greater quandary over special relationship after Iran attack." And that article pointed out that Starmer appears to have had little influence on Trump, who went ahead regardless. Now, a conservative British channel put it even more bluntly in terms of the damage that's been done to the special relationship.
What are the implications, Piers Pottinger, for the special relationship in the context of Starmer's refusal to help?
I don't know, but if I was...
I don't think the Americans will forget.
No, I don't think so, and I think Trump will be, if indeed it's true that he wanted to use our bases and we didn't allow him, I think he will not forget that or forgive it.
But it wasn't just Britain. France, Germany, and the UK issued a joint statement clarifying first and foremost they did not participate in the strikes. Not a statement of strategy, a statement of absence. And the best the European Union could manage was Ursula von der Leyen sending a message to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And here's what she said.
As our strategic partner, we will work closely with you to de-escalate and safeguard regional stability. You can count on our full support in these turbulent times. The European Union Gulf Cooperation Council partnership will only get stronger in the period ahead.
Now, the responses to this on X were brutal. One commentator appropriately rephrased it, quote, "In other words, Trump won't take my call, and we have no clue what's going on." That's exactly right. And the statesman drilled down on the same point. The Iran war makes it official. America is breaking with Europe. So the special relationship is cracking in public. When Tehran calls, it calls Washington, not London. And the question worth asking is, how did that special relationship actually work? Not the photo ops and the state visits. What was the real mechanism? Part of the answer is former Prince Andrew. Let's go back to 2008 when the British were still happily directing American foreign policy. Andrew, then Britain's special representative for international trade, sat down in Kyrgyzstan with a room that included businessmen, government officials, and the American ambassador. The American ambassador wrote it all down in a cable, later published by WikiLeaks. And she told people that what Andrew told the room with astonishing frankness was the following. The United Kingdom, Western Europe, and by extension, you Americans too are now back in the thick of playing the great game. And this time we aim to win. He wasn't being metaphorical. He was describing it to an American diplomat on the record, the actual operating framework of British foreign policy. Not the public version dressed up in democracy and human rights, but the real version, in his official capacity as Britain's trade representative. Now Andrew's been arrested, the first royal arrest in centuries, on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The Epstein files contain evidence he was passing confidential trade reports into Epstein's networks. So the man who bragged about winning the great game was running British strategic intelligence through Jeffrey Epstein. That is not a personal scandal. That is the operating method of the imperial apparatus, now on public record. And shortly after Andrew's arrest came the arrest of Lord Peter Mandelson, who had been appointed by Starmer as Britain's ambassador to Washington, sent to manage the special relationship at the very moment Trump came in for his second term. The Epstein files show that Mandelson was passing advanced knowledge of British financial policy into the same networks. So the geopolitical operative and the financial operative, both out on bail, arrested, both exposed at the same moment, the apparatus itself is being dismantled. The Iran strike ended the special relationship, and it's out in the open. Britain is sidelined. Europe is issuing statements of absence. Tehran is calling Washington. And simultaneously, the men who ran the real special relationship, Andrew running the geopolitical side, Mandelson running the financial intelligence, are on the chopping block, taken off the board together. This is not a coincidence. This is the end of geopolitics. Now, ending an entrenched system is not easy, and it is dangerous. That is why you have to stay focused and on the stage of history. So join Promethean Action so that we can see this through to the end. This has been your Monday Brief. Thanks for watching.
Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at prometheanaction.com.